Some ghosts don't haunt you until you go looking for them. Since returning, sleepless nights had become my routine. Insomnia clung to me, a side effect of reverse culture shock, they said. Reacclimation wasn't as easy as I'd hoped. The clock blinked 3:17 a.m., its green glow casting ghostly shadows across my walls. Sleep had abandoned me hours ago, leaving only the restless part of the night. I drifted from the bed to the couch, where the hum of the city barely reached me, and then, like a whisper I hadn't asked for, his name surfaced. Unbidden, persistent. Herman. If I'm being honest, I hadn't thought about him in years. I hadn't seen him in over 15. I certainly hadn't spoken about him with anyone. Yet here I was, fingers hovering over the keyboard as though typing his name might summon a ghost. The search bar blinked back at me. I hesitated. Then I typed. Autocomplete filled the blanks before I could finish. Herman conviction. Herman prison siege. Herman death. The words didn't make sense. They didn't belong to the boy I knew. I clicked. I read. Every detail confirmed it. The scar was the same. His face, aged, hardened, unmistakable. The realization hit like sickness. The headline hit harder. Inmate dies in violent prison siege. His name, so familiar, so alien, jumped off the screen. I scrolled through the paragraphs, each word erasing the boy I once knew and replacing him with a stranger trapped in a brutal, merciless world. I remembered the boy who scaled fences like they were playgrounds, his laughter bouncing off cracked pavement. I remembered the glow of a Nintendo screen, his fingers tapping furiously as we battled pixelated villains. That boy wasn't in the headlines. Instead, they butchered him in ink, skinning away the boy and mounting his remains on the wall of public spectacle, a grotesque trophy of today's hunger for villains. The details blurred together, ties to a criminal underworld, a hostage situation in prison, a police siege that ended in his death. The words turned my childhood friend into a caricature of villainy. And the forums, Jesus, the forums, a feeding frenzy. They called him an animal, finally captured and slaughtered. The way they howled, ravenous and gleeful, gorging themselves on his downfall like starved beasts in a pit, made me wonder, who are the real predators? Their words exposed something raw and unsettling, an almost primal satisfaction in his end. They stripped him of complexity, of history, of context, until he was nothing more than a headline. But the real horror wasn't the headlines. It was the question that gnawed at my marrow. How did he get here? How did we let this happen? I've stood in classrooms filled with children, their lives raw with potential, their paths still uncharted. And yet, when I look at Herman's story, I couldn't help but trace the failures back to where I had once stood, at the threshold of young lives, attempting to guide them towards brighter futures, only to wonder how many of them were already predestined to fail. By the time Herman entered the school system, was he already lost? Did the system fail him long before I could have reached him? What would have changed his path? What could have been different? I kept scrolling. More articles, more photographs. Recent pictures, likely taken before his last court date, showed his family. His mother looked decades older, her face lined with exhaustion. His baby sister was now a woman, a mother herself. But his father was conspicuously absent, a ghost figure as he had always been during the afternoons when Herman and I ran through empty lots and spent hours playing Nintendo. Back then, his absence was just part of the static, blending into a white noise of a world that didn't care. Now, it was a fracture in the bones of a story I hadn't realized was breaking from the start. Those photographs felt intrusive, like I shouldn't be looking at them, like I had no right to witness a family suffering. But I couldn't stop myself. Seeing them, I felt the years collapse. I felt the weight of a life and a death that extended far beyond one person, tied to family, history, cycles of neglect and violence. And yet I wondered, what could have been different? What if his father had shown up? What if someone had intervened earlier? What if someone had recognized the signs in that child? The same child who had once laughed and climbed fences with me. The question lingered, unanswerable, a silent knot in my gut. As the first light of dawn painted the horizon, his name still lingered on the screen, the faces of his family still in my mind. The boy I knew, the man he became, the stranger the world saw, it was all a disorienting mix. I slammed the laptop shut, bile burning my throat, the weight of it all pressing down like a foot on my chest. The loss, the failures, the ugly truth sinking in. Maybe grief was useless. Maybe mourning was just another way to pretend it wasn't too late. But the question still lingered. What could I have done differently? I like stories that sit in the back of your mind long after they're done. If you're the same, you might like what's coming up next.